Today is January the 25th, 2024, and this is part
Happy
4.
New Year.
Same to you. And this is part 4 of our time with Annawyn DeBenning Shamas. Yeah, you got it right this time, first time
you
around.
You did it, good.
Welcome back to Stillwater.
Thank you.
And her daughter-in-law, Annette's with us again, too, so... we're going to, a little time has passed since we visited last, and I understand you have a few more stories you want to add to this, so I'll turn it over to you and start wherever you like.
Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate being able to follow up a little bit because when I was here before, you and Annette helped as well, provided, kind of a thread and a lead through with me, but when I returned to my home in Littleton, Colorado, I began to think, I wish I'd said this, or I wish I had something other. And you are so gracious and made time for me to come back and try to add to a little bit to some of the stuff I said, or, my interest and connection with Oklahoma State, with Stillwater, and specifically with the theater department. Oklahoma A&M became Oklahoma State in 1957. I graduated my degree. Received my degree in 1956, and I did say this. I did cover it, I think, in a previous interview about the fact that I received 2 degrees, one of them from Oklahoma State. That was really a surprise to me. I had no idea that was going to happen. And I think it was issued to me in 1958, having become Oklahoma State itself in 1957, and I with the 1956 degree in speech/theater, or theater/speech. I want to be clear about what the college was like at that time, because when I was in school, there was in front of the college auditorium, which is where the Saratine Center is located now. The theater department is located in that building. There was a broad expanse. We could see directly toward Old Central, and it was the student union opened at the time that I was in school here, or just previously before, because it was a relatively new building, and it was a wonderful building, an exciting building for all of us to have access to. But there was also another building here, and I can't think of the name of it, and probably you can tell me, but it was an animal husbandry location. It's like a rodeo arena, where you would have a rodeo. And so I, as a young girl, in fact, I'll just mention one thing that happened in this other venue. The Girl Scouts met there for some kind of citywide jamboree. And so it had a dirt floor all around it. And I apologize, I should have researched it and tried to come up with the name of it. But it was big. So we had that at one end of the town, with the earthy smells that goes with horses and livestock in there. And we did a program on that floor, that dirt floor. I'm sure they arranged for it to be relatively clean for us to perform. I even remember I think I was going into the 7th grade when this happened. And so my troop we were doing somehow dances or referencing cultures from other towns, not towns, countries. And ours was Ireland, and so we did an Irish jig, and I remember vividly doing it. I remember the smell, and I love that smell in there. And so Oklahoma A&M was that building, and then it was this building at the other end with the college auditorium, with the theater department in. So the worlds were vast, but it was an inclusive world because to include all of that, with Oklahoma A&M. And I wanted to just share a little story about my husband, Jimmy Ellis Shamas, Sr. And he was from Bristow, Oklahoma. And his best friend was Ted Christian, who is also, of course, from Bristow. And they were co-captains of the football team. My husband was president of the senior class, and Ted Christian was president of the student council. So they were looked at as, prized young men, and they were both very good students. They went to OU to scope it out before they came to Oklahoma A&M, and so they didn't feel totally comfortable there. All the boys were wearing, all the male students were in slacks. And I'm sure the girls were dressed appropriately, and I'm sure they noticed it, but he didn't share that with me. But then they came over to Oklahoma A&M, and here they are, jeans and boots, and they knew immediately that this is where they wanted to be. And I just wanted to share that because my husband told me, he didn't actually say this, but he said enough for me to put it together. I know that the times that he spent, the years that he was here, working in I'm trying to think, his degree was in, he was in pipeline, was what his area of focus in the oil industry. And so was Ted's. Ted Christian entered the Air Force, and that became his career was the service. My husband chose not, because we were married. We got married our senior year, and so although Jim was high in the Air Force ROTC ranking at Oklahoma State, and he had an opportunity through his father to be in the first class of students at Colorado Springs at the Air Force Academy there. Mr. Shamas, his father, had some connection with one of the senators at the time, and he could have gone there, but he talked to me about it because we met when we were freshmen, and he would have to have repeated his freshman year, but he did not want to leave Oklahoma A&M, but it would have been a high honor to have been in that first class, and it was an honor for him to have been chosen for it. He also, just to say one more thing about him, when he went to the summer camp, which was at March Air Force Base in California, and of all the students, cross country that come there for that summer camp event episode, he and his roommate were chosen as the outstanding ROTC students there. And so that was the young man that I married. And he was very supportive of me all along through my life and almost anything that I did. We moved around a lot as a couple. And so my theater participation was limited to places where he was. And I made that decision. That was something that I knew. It was a conscious one, and I certainly do not regret it, because my experiences, I was always focused toward community theater, and that was the way that I was educated at Oklahoma State and at Oklahoma A&M. And so I really wasn't thinking, I want to go to New York City or whatever, although people do dream of that and think about it. But once you get married, that's a commitment that you make, and so that was one that I made. And I appreciated the places that we were sent, and every place that I was sent, and I feel that what I'm saying is being repetitive, I always found a theater. The two places that I looked for when we moved, I always looked for the church I wanted, to find. And I always wanted to see if there was a theater. When the first place we moved was Independence, Kansas, after my graduation, and a job that Jimmy had with the Sinclair Pipeline Company. That was a place that I could have participated. There wasn't a community theater, but I could have participated a little bit more there, but I had a young baby, and so I wasn't doing that. But I just wanted to establish that I was very fortunate to have married someone who provided in his own, and just in the partnership, access always. He didn't do it, but it worked out that way, that I could participate. And so I had a career, and I had a theater career, and it was in the community theater. And I'm proud of it, and proud of the training I received, and also proud of my husband and the things that he achieved.
How did he ask you to marry him?
Well, I just think it was, we met when he didn't actually ask me.
Okay.
It was, we'd talked about it, and we were going into our senior year, and we talked about it, getting off and on, would we not? And so he told me, he said, listen, we just need to do this, Annawyn. and I said, oh, I don't know. I didn't have any doubts about him, but there was a timing.
The timing, yes.
And my mother said, she asked us to wait. And if I am duplicating a statement, just bear with me, my dear. She asked us to wait till we were both 21. And so we both became 21 in November. His birthday was on the 20th. And we got married on the 22nd of November. But he was so handsome. I just have visions. All of these memories have come back to me after he would be in whatever he was doing in his uniform for ROTC. We would meet in the student union, and I was always so proud to see him, because he was just an outstanding looking young man. And he was very intelligent, which that always mattered to me. I always liked somebody who was fun too, and witty, and he certainly was all of that. And he did very well in his career. And
did you get married on or in Stillwater on campus, or where?
We were married in the First Methodist Church in Stillwater, Oklahoma.
Okay.
And this was my hometown, and so it was a fairly big wedding.
Okay.
And my mother was very creative. As I talked to you, I mentioned to you something about a story that she'd written, and that I was going to send it to you so you could see it, and I'm still going to do that. But her, just as my career was affected by my marriage, her career, she could have been and did write things that were quite wonderful, but she could not fully, she didn't have the time to devote to it, to keep that going, because writing is something that you just have to continue doing it. And I found in the writing that I do that if I don't, it's a job. If you are a writer, then it is your job to do. You can be passionate about something and still not do it, and you just have to be disciplined to do it. So she was, as a teacher, my mother taught every year of my life. She was, and once again, I'm pointing to the fact that my father was, wherever he was, his career took him, that was where it was not that she would not be considered. It was just that at that time that it was considered that way, that you would
Follow the man.
the breadwinner, the major bed was the man. Of course, that's not the case now, and I've probably seemed like a throwback to the age of the dinosaurs in this, and probably am. But that's the way it was, and there are a lot of women who did emerge from that setup, that not dependency, but that arrangement, and you found ways to do it, as I did, and as my mother did, but she just didn't have time to sit down and just write. But I'm trying to think of, his degree was, he was an not industrial engineer, but he had a petroleum option on his, an engineering degree with a petroleum option. And he had wonderful teachers. He talked about them too. I did not get to know his teachers as well as he did, of course, but he got to know some of my teachers pretty well. Miss Locke, he knew, everybody who knew her loved her. You couldn't help it.
Well, do you think that her knowing that you were engaged and going to be married and then end up kind of following his career, is that why she steered you toward community?
I think that she did it before that. I think
okay.
she did, because she recognized it's just a tough thing to do it. And I thought a lot about it. I see so many people that I think are talented, and I can look at a commercial and realize that perhaps that person giving that commercial, the spokes, has a tremendous theater talent, and perhaps has been on the stage and this or that in New York, and this is what this person is doing now. And I'm not downplaying that at all, because when I see that, I recognize it, and so I do feel that my brother, I mentioned my brother previously, my brother became a film actor, television actor, and he had a very strong career. DeBenning is his name. And I just marvel at him and how they wouldn't, I'm telling you, the Miss Locke, nobody would have picked him out and said, this kid is going to go and make some movies, and it just wouldn't have happened. My brother was, one of the roles that he did was, I'm trying to think what it's from Twelfth Night, but it's Sir Andrew Aguecheek, who is a total, comedy guy, and so he and my brother was not reined in. He would get up on stage and just do just about anything. One of the regrets he had, that he auditioned. Stop me, please, now if I'm repeating it. I know I didn't talk too much about this, but he auditioned to be the MC for the Varsity Review, and I helped him. I mean, big sister Annawyn. But there were several things that I'd picked up from TV that he chose, that he did, but he wasn't chosen. He was second choice, and the man who did it, of course, didn't go on to do anything that my brother did, had the career that my brother did. I'll tell you one of the things that was in his audition bid, and I'm sure you will say, well, with that, he should have won. And it was, he's imitating someone smoking and advertising a cigarette, and so this fellow auditioning for this commercial is nervous, and so he smokes his cigarette and he says, "Man, that's coffee." So that was something I picked up, that brilliant line from something that was on television. So that's the kind of audition my brother had. perhaps the other I saw them all, so I really thought my brother did well. But there were other people who were part of the theater group that I matriculated with that my brother changed his major. He became in as a business major. He's 2 years younger than I. So it wasn't until I became a junior that he became part of the, well, he wasn't part of the theater. When it was this, he came in when I was graduating. He that's when he changed and became part of the theater. But Miss Locke did recognize him as a talent because she brought him back as a guest star. They did a production of The Crucible in the summer program, theater program, and he was brought back to play John Proctor. And he was the guest star who was brought back to play it with students from Oklahoma State. So she recognized him. She certainly did. And but I want to see if I can keep on my little schedule here. I wanted to honor students, or to mention them, students that I was in association with, and when I was in school. One of them, I'm going to mention 3 of them now who came from Stillwater High School, and that were in my freshman class. Patty Graham was one. Betty Taylor, and this note is for my daughter-in-law. Both of these 2 young women were Pi Phis. So, and then Jim Turtelot, he was a Sigma Nu. He was in the same class. We were all from Stillwater High School. We all participated with the same speech teacher there, and then of course that I was part of it as well. When we got to these people that I'm mentioning now were not necessarily in my class, but they were people in the theater department at the time. And I'm mentioning because I associated with them, I respected them, and I loved being with them. One of them, I've just written them down, so I'm just going to say their names. Marilyn Purdy, Walida Smith, Marilyn Hundley, Neil Gaby. Neil Gaby was the person from Brooklyn that I mentioned that Miss Locke actually, I believe, chose the play The Traitor to feature him because he was an unusual type to cast. Jo Ann Muchmore. Jo Ann Muchmore is a friend who moved here. She's a tremendous talent, and she went into community theater as well because she had the same situation that I did. She was married, had a child, and so she was she had to participate where her husband was, but then she divorced and remarried, and then that marriage was not successful. So she then was out as a community theater director. She's the one who hired me to come and direct at her theater in Temple, Texas, where she was, and she was a blazing acting talent as well. Her best friend was in school was Carrie Nye, who was married to Dick Cavett, and Jo Ann became at a point in her life one of the associate producers on the Dick Cavett show, which was on PBS. And Eric Burns, I remember he did in my directing class. I asked him to be in it, and he did, and he was a good friend. Virginia Roper. All of these people, we saw in classes and when we were in plays. And mentioned John Atchley. He was the young man who showed up in his senior year and said, "I want to be an actor," and became one and made lots of fun movies that he enjoyed being in. Merle Phillips, Frida Dills, Wirt Kane, Nineveh Ibrahim, we had 2 or 3 foreign students who were part of our company as well. Lionel Ostell, Virginia Kaplinger, Nancy Huss, Jim Green. Jim Green played opposite me, or I played opposite him when he did Romeo. Try to be less self-centered. Bob Castleberry, John Wilkerson, Ray Tompkins. Now I want to talk briefly. I mentioned Olive Hillis, but she's the first person that I knew at Oklahoma State that I had a close relationship with, Oklahoma A&M close relationship with. Her house was over here, not far from where Lincoln Grade School is now. And my mother hired her to coach me. My mother actually hired, when I was a freshman, my mother was like this for both my brother and for me. If there was something, she went to the sources of training. If there's something that we were good at, she thought, she promoted it and found ways to support it. I don't know whether I talked about my mother. This is related to my brother. He was not chosen to be on, it was when he was in the 7th grade, and he was not chosen to be on this basketball team. It was not a school one, but it was some kind of neighborhood thing. Well, so my mother, and there was also another young man who wasn't chosen. It was Roy Castle. Roy Carberry. He became an Oklahoma State star. I mean, he was in basketball. But he wasn't picked to be at this time on this team. So my mother, because we lived very close to the Sigma Alpha Epsilon house, we were just across the street from it. So she went over there and hired a young man to coach a team. She started a team for my brother to be on, and Roy Carberry. And so they had the opportunity to play basketball and be on a team and compete. And so that was what she was trying to make happen. As I said, she also hired Olive Hillis for me and to work with me. There was a young man who was on the campus, a teacher on the OSU staff, and I can't think of his name, but he moved he was the first person who was going to teach me. And that is the thing that I have emphasized and want to impress and say how important it was to me to have the interacting with the university, with the town, to have access to that is such a resource for people and provides us with so much more than we would ordinarily have in a town without a college. And it has to be that way every place there is a university in a town. It spills over. The enrichments, flow out from it. And so that was one of the things that I had access to. I could go up on the campus as a high school student. There was a building, I don't think the building is there any longer, but I was doing research on some poetry things. And I could go in there and I knew enough about it to be able to, I can't do that today. I mean, I don't have the ability to function that way anymore. But I could go in there and research poems and hear stuff that I wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And I competed in poetry competitions, so I was very interested in doing that. But the young man that was initially hired by my mother to coach me moved away to University of Arkansas. So for a little while in there, I didn't have anybody to coach me, and then she found Olive Hillis. Now, Olive Hillis was she came to the campus, I believe, in the 40s, maybe the late 40s. Miss Locke came to the campus to Oklahoma A&M in 1950. So I was in high school and was not exposed to her then, except I don't want to get ahead of myself, she was a judge at a speech contest that I attended in Tahlequah. And she was so beautiful. I was stunned by it. I mean, I've mentioned it earlier. I never forgot the way she looked. And I just, I was just like this, just so gobsmacked because she was just a gorgeous looking young woman. And I've figured out, she came, and when she was here, she was young. I don't think she was 40 yet. And because she died relatively young, she died when she was only 71. And that's not a terribly long life, although now it's not considered, relatively long either. But so then Mrs. Hillis entered my life. And I'm going to make sure that I'm following this. I am. Mrs. Hillis graduated from Oklahoma University. So did Vivia Locke. Mrs. Hillis then went to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. I don't know how long she was there. All of this is, I'm a student, self-centered. I mean, unfortunately, terribly self-centered. And so I just regret so much that I did not pursue this. And in questioning Mrs. Hillis, I did manage to learn a little bit about it when she was at the American Academy, because at that time, I don't know its condition now, and I really ought to try to research it a little bit. But that was like the Royal Academy in London. We look at that, as the epitome of instruction and honor to be able to go to that school. This is the way the National Academy of Dramatic Arts was considered when I was growing up. So that's where Mrs. Hillis went. She was so outstanding there that upon her graduation, or how long it was to matriculate, to say you graduated from there, she was picked to be the second lead in a Broadway show that was going to be put on, the Broadway stage. And that show was Lilium, and it's by a writer named Frank Molnar. And people are more familiar with the material because the musical Carousel was based on that work, that play. And she returned, however, to Oklahoma. I don't know, that's one of the things, that it would have been so, maybe she got married, because I think that her husband, this is a blank in my knowledge about her, I think her husband was connected with Oklahoma State or Oklahoma A&M at the time. And I've tried to find it out. I'm not able to do it, but I know that there's a way. I bet my daughter-in-law could do it. I bet you could do it. Anyway. But so she became a Stillwater resident. And she coached me in, and I mentioned this previously because it was a high point in my young life, in humorous reading and in poetry. Those were the two areas that I entered in. I never did get beyond in the poetry reading. I never got beyond just the initial. I qualified for state competition. You had to go through. You had to win at a regional competition to be able to go to the state, and so I was able to do that in poetry and go to the state, but I did not place. But my senior year in high school, I did, coached by Olive Hillis, I did a reading for Midsummer Night's Dream, and it's the rustics scene, and I won first place. There's a story behind it that is interesting, but I won't go into that now. I'm not trying to tantalize you, but I won't spend the time on it. But I feel very strongly that without her, it wouldn't have been a winning shot. And that was, as I said, one of the high points of my life. And I remember sitting with my mother in the banquet room where the winners were being announced, and how thrilling it was to have that happen at that time. And the other thing about it was very thrilling because my mother, my speech teacher in Stillwater High School, could not go. She was very, very ill. And so I was the only one who went to compete that year because, as I said, it's a tough competition, kind of elimination thing. And you're lucky if you get that far. So, because I'd competed in humorous readings and gotten to the finals, but never, placed. But I won first place, and I know my mother, we didn't discuss it, but as an adult and looking back on, from this height of years that I have climbed to tottering as I'm going up, that I know she was thrilled. And that's a memory that I hold close, to know that, because when I look back, as people do, they find things or people that they wish that they had expressed more to about you, the way you felt about them. My mother knew I loved her, but I would smother that woman in hugs and kisses now if I had the chance. But of course I can't. But I did recognize at the time, that was an important thing for both of us. I'm going to move on to Miss Locke because I know that all of this information is on. You can Google it and find out all of this. But she, as I said, she went to Oklahoma University, and she then went to University of Southern California, USC. And on the staff there was William DeMille. William DeMille was the brother of Cecil B. And also William DeMille was, I believe that Agnes DeMille, who's a very famous choreographer, she did the choreography, which was a breakthrough thing in Oklahoma, the musical Oklahoma. And her introducing ballet in that, the dream sequence is a very famous sequence in Oklahoma, and and Curly and Laurie they dance as a dream sequence in it. So Agnes DeMille, I believe she was the daughter of William and not Cecil B. I certainly, well, anyway. And she quoted him a lot. I wish I could quote you something that William DeMille said, but it was Mr. DeMille. Mr. DeMille said this. Mr. DeMille. He was clearly a major influence upon her. And I was trying to think of she became, I don't know where she began to study French. I don't think she did it, in her hometown. She's buried in Caddo, Oklahoma. And I don't know whether Caddo was her hometown or not. It sounds like it must have been, but nevertheless, I don't believe that she learned French there. I don't know where she went to grade school. She might have been sent away to school somewhere. I don't know, but she went to Oklahoma University. She graduated from there. And then, as I said, she went on to USC. The other thing, though, that is a mystery to me, and I don't think I mentioned this previously, there was always this talk about her that she had been one of young stars, or as a child, I think she was actually participated in something like when she was 4 or 5 years old, like a Shirley Temple, and that she actually, did that. And I asked her about it. And she kind of pushed it away or something. And I should have pursued it because, nobody knows now. I mean, except me and one other kid. No, I'm sure a lot of people, because there were people who were very curious about it because it was circulating around that she wasn't a big child star, but she had been considered, a potentially one. But I never saw a picture of her as a child, but I can bet you money that she was a darling looking little girl. And that probably that her mother, thought she's beautiful enough to do anything that Shirley Temple can do. But then after, there, she worked on, I'm not sure where, she was in the service. Did we discuss that?
She was the whack.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And then
a little bit
for 3 years.
Oh,
just a little bit.
Okay. And but then it must have been after that she went back to USC. I don't know the sequence, and that's another thing that I regret. The sequence of even my family. I wish that I don't know how to describe it. So normal in my interest only in myself. But there are other people who have the sense enough to, and pursue those things, that they're curious about them. And I regret so much that I didn't, want to find out specific things about my parents. And asking me, Jimmy asked me, how did he propose? And my mother, I better not go down that lane. That's another one.
Did he get your father's permission?
Well, he did.
Okay.
He did.
At least he did that then. Okay.
He did. He asked for my hand. But her progression to Oklahoma State, I mean, she had, this was all in her obituary. She, not about her progression, but that she had studied at USC, and where that fits in with her term or her tour with the Army is something, I feel that it had to have been right after she graduated that she went into the service, but perhaps not. But her graduate work was done at USC and at the University of Kansas. And I do know that she intended to go back. I don't know when she decided that she would not, pursue that, to get her PhD from the University of Kansas, because she spoke to me about not replacing her, but taking over courses that she was teaching. And I was actually, kind of stunned by that, but she did. She approached me about it, talked to me that if she said, maybe I said this before, that if she did go, she was thinking about getting a sabbatical, and she talked it over, or she did discuss these things with students, and that she wanted me to be attached to the university, and it was an honor to be approached by her like that. Now, Miss Locke's, we've established, I believe, or we've talked about it, her father was the principal chief of the Choctaw Nation. And she was the one who informed me about, I knew, of course, that I was Chickasaw. She's the one that educated me about the fact that the Choctaw tribe and the Chickasaw tribe were one tribe at one time, and they split. And this was, I can remember the place where some of this discussion took place. It was kind of in catacombs off of in the Prairie Playhouse. There were offices that were beyond the stage. The Prairie Playhouse, anybody who went to Oklahoma A&M has to look at the Prairie Playhouse with sweet memories, because it was an unusual building. Williams Hall was the name of the building. My daughter-in-law thinks that it should be preserved. I mean, it should have been, because it looked like a castle. It was what had to be. That can be researched, and when it was put up in its relationship with Old Central. But the college auditorium, that's where all of our plays were done. But also, I know that we had freshman orientation in that auditorium. That was the location, because it was a big auditorium. And the Sartine Center was a big improvement on it, of course, but it's still the college auditorium, still for those, and Williams Hall, and the Prairie Playhouse within Williams Hall are meaningful locales in our education. And they were both wonderful places to be. Theaters themselves are they're wonderful for you to have a stage. And I can't remember which of the Shakespeare plays it's one, Richard II, or I don't. Anyway, he says, a horse, because it's the battle and he's horseless. A horse, my kingdom for a horse. And so my plea throughout my life is a stage, my kingdom for a stage. So it's anywhere if you're lucky to have a stage, if you make your own stage, or however you do it, a theater person will do it, because it's a major thing in your life. The Korean War was going on at the time when I was a senior in high school, so that was happening at the time that I was in college. And in addition to, that war, somebody asked me just last Monday, she said, "Do you remember a time when we have not been at war?" And I couldn't think of it. I mean, because we were in the Korean War, and then we were in the Vietnam. I mean, historians will be rolling their eyes at what I have to say about it, because I'm really ignorant about it. Not stupid, but ignorant. But it does. We watched and I had a classmate who died in air training, related to the Korean War, and it was just all of the history around it, because I remember the things that were being said about going in and the encroachment of the communist Chinese in the country, and but when it ended, which they don't really end in a magnificent way. It's in T.S. Eliot's, he's famous for it ends with in a whimper and not a bang, and it seems to me that is the way that the last military encounters we've had seemed to end. But we had people coming into our classrooms, and matriculating as students who had participated, who were soldiers, and that was something that we were aware of. It also was that when I went into college, I was in high school, that was the end of World War II, and we had that same experience with the young men coming back, young women returning, and that caused a housing shortage. I did touch briefly on that, I believe, in previous interviews. But there's a part of Stillwater here now where the hospital is at this occasion. That whole area was barracks at one time, and then those and I really, because I was just so young, I wasn't sure how they were being used, but they were turned into housing for students who were married who came back from the war. Mm. And I babysat with couples who were there and housed that way. And so in tracing my education, I'm just looking at it now. So it was World War II, and then we went into the Korean War, and I'm not going to go on from there, but it affects a university because of the influx of students and veterans coming back. And so that was something that was going on within the education system at every university, not just unique to Oklahoma State. I was a double major in English and in theater when I graduated, and I don't want to get too far. I want to touch back on this about Miss Locke and her, sharing with me the information about the Chickasaws and the Choctaws being so close. And it was at that time that I could tell that she began to feel closer to me. And I felt closer to her as well, because they were one tribe and the DNA is the same. And I don't know about the language. I would have to learn, study it more. One of my father, the Native American heritage came through my mother to me, but my father was he was around this the community of my mother's relatives, and so he I think that I picked up. Fortunately, there were not any cuss words or vulgarities in the things that he picked up, but one of them I'm going to say and hope that I'm being accurate on it. But one of the ones that he said, and I'm just going to say it, and it was because supposedly I know what it means, because I went to a conference, a Chickasaw conference that came to Denver, and there was a language specialist fellow there, and so I asked him about this phrase, and he told me what it meant, so I'll share it with you. But this is a phrase, and I think it came from my father. I know, because just the way it sounds, I cannot remember if it was my mother or my father, but I think it came from him. Well, the point being, he was around enough that he became very familiar with the Native American people. With family members, and there were ones that he talked to me about. One of the cousins of my mother that he thought was really sweet. Here's the phrase: "Nippy Sabana Hooday." And so I, did that and talked to this man there who was at the conference. And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "It means," and he wasn't pulling my leg. He said, "It means I want meat and I want it now." So it's hard to introduce that into conversation with another Chickasaw, which I have never been in a conversation using the language. My younger daughter she's trying to learn Native American Chickasaw phrases, and my granddaughters are learning a little bit, not much, but a little, and I really ought to try to do it myself. But tracing it back to the time when Miss Locke educated me, she was active as a Native American in the communities. She was, this information is in her obituary, at one point she was chosen the outstanding woman of the state, Native American woman in the state. She had a cousin whom we were around some, not much, but her name was Elise. I wrote it down. I'm trying to where I put it, but her first name was Elise, and her husband was connected, I think, with a bank of somewhere. But they were, I believe, from the Muskogee area. Maybe not, but that's where the Museum of the Five Civilized Tribes is located. And so there is a Miss Locke and her cousin, Elise, established a playwriting competition, and it was in connection with, and it's still going on, I believe, the Five Civilized Tribes. And actually, my older daughter, Laura Annawyn Shamas, is a playwright, and she won that competition. She entered it once and didn't win it, and then she entered it again and did win it. And we went to Muskogee, where we got to see the production a reading production of it. But that was something that Miss Locke established, and she also, I believe, she was not living at the time when my daughter. I think I just thought back how wonderful it would have been to, share that with her, but that part of the winning of that would have been a production at Oklahoma State. However, I believe that might have been at one time the way that it was set up. And it would have been perfect. She was head of the department, and it would have been a wonderful collaboration to have. And I think something was produced here from that competition at one time. I don't know how fully it was followed. That was not included when my daughter was awarded that prize. And even though she was a Chickasaw, my daughter wrote about Sequoyah and his founding of the Cherokee alphabet, and writing about that and communication. And her, I believe, as I remember correct, I think the name of her play was Talking Leaves. And just mentioning that Miss Locke, that was a thing that she and her cousin did, and that was connected with the theater, and it was a support of Native American writing, and so I think that was a very important thing that she did, and very important that her husband. I keep wanting to say her cousin was able to provide the wherewithal that this could actually be progressed to what it became as a competition among the five civilized tribes. I mentioned earlier that I had a double major, and I also had, in the speech department and / theater, I've mentioned the people who were in discussing generally with the theater, who were influential for me. Mrs. Hillis, Miss Locke. I mentioned briefly John Green, who was the technical instructor here, and but the speech department, of course, was connected. It was all one department, and we had some outstanding, for me, speech instructors, and I'm not able to mention them all. because I can't come up. I did not research it enough to do it, but Mr. Heinberg was one of the instructors in the speech department. In the English department, I was very fond of the head of the department. It was Dr. Anderson. There was a very personal relationship. That is something that I would hope other students could experience as I did. A very personal relationship with the instructors. I mean, you were not on a level with them. That didn't mean that you could take for granted a familiarity at all. I mean, there was always respect. But the fact that these instructors here, and I think particularly here, were open and warm and supportive, and you were friends. You couldn't be, a friend like on your own peer group or anything like that, but you knew they were your friends. And so the head of the English department, Mr. Anderson, Dr. Anderson, was very, very supportive and good to me. I was I got to teach in the English department as well as a graduate assistant. When I graduated from OSU, I spent a year as a graduate assistant, and at that time there was no advanced educational level for theater speech, and so I was going to be working on my degree in the English department, master's degree. But when Oklahoma State came into existence, then that program expanded, and that path was open to me. So I changed from working toward my master's in English to the theater/speech. And we had Miss Locke always was supportive of people who were her comrades who were younger. I mean, one of the experiences that I had was I was a part of the theater faculty in 1964, 1965, and or maybe it was 65, 66, but I taught 3 classes, and one of them was oral interpretation. And I had a student, I will not say his name, but he was very talented. He was extremely talented. I don't know that I did mention Jo Ann Muchmore, in this mentioning students. But anyway, and he was not in my peer group. He was, I was teaching him, and so I was long out of school, and he was in the oral interpretation class, and I gave him a B. That was his grade, and he objected, and he came to Miss Locke about it, and he probably had a leg to stand on, but because he was so talented, I made a subjective decision, and perhaps it was wrong. He was head and shoulders, above everybody, but he was lazy. I shouldn't even say that. He didn't have to work at it. It just came. And so I just felt my expectations for him were very high. And so probably that was not the right way for me. I should have perhaps not judged him that way. But Miss Locke, she was had my back, she wasn't having any of that, There was another thing that happened once when I came back, and I was in a town and gown production, and she was, on the campus, and and it was a production of Androcles and the Lion. And they had somebody here who was connected with the theater department who was doing the costumes for that show. And this young man he was very unprofessional in the way that he handled things. And he said some things that he shouldn't have said about me and costuming me, which were not flattering. And it got back to me, because you can't say these things to students. I wouldn't run to somebody and say, I never did, run to, did you know what somebody said about you? I never did. Not that I'm, so absolutely good, because I'm not, but that's one thing I never did. And I would talk to Miss Locke about it, and she said her loyalty was not to him. It was to me. I was back in the community theater production, not in the theater production. It wasn't theater produced. She said, because he had come in from Hollywood, she said, do not pay any attention to these people who drift in here from Hollywood. Don't, he said, their whole emphasis is on this and this and this, and not on anything that, so, that's the kind she did. So she supported in every way. And one of the ways that she supported, in addition to, talking and being head of something and saying, you're right, and recognizing that you needed to stand by your faculty members as a rule, but she had cause to do it, is the fact that she chose faculty members from students. Students could, I never thought of that I would eventually be on the theater staff. My life situation was not, destined that way because of my marriage. And I was married in 1955, and my daughter Laura, Annawyn Shamas, was born in 1957. And so our family, was, I don't need to say any more about it, because it was clear my path changed. It had to. I mentioned Dr. Anderson with the English department. In the speech department, I don't know whether I mentioned Mr. Heinberg or not, but there was another teacher, Mr. Coach, and it's spelled Koch. Now that spelling is called Coke. And it's interesting to me, but his name was pronounced Coach. And he was a wonderful teacher as well. All of these people were wonderful teachers for me, and were very supportive of me. And it's just these things you just aren't aware of, what's really going on. The philosophy of the theater department, and it has to be a philosophy now, and a philosophy of probably any theater department in a thing. It's just like any company, any repertoire company that has, what you have with you, the students that are here. And so the thing about a university theater, and this maybe sounds, somebody coined the phrase, you have a commanding grasp of the obvious, and that's been said about me. With my commanding grasp of the obvious, I understand so much, but I realize, I look back and know that because I was here, they knew I was here. So when I entered as a freshman, and Romeo and Juliet was produced when I was a sophomore. So the powers that be who choose a season are aware of who's here. Now, the advantage that a theater, with my commanding grasp of the obvious, I see this, has that it doesn't have to worry about breaking even. It doesn't have to worry about if it's going to sell commercially. That business of that theater department is to educate the student on theater, beginning back when the first actor stepped out of the Greek chorus and said a line. From that point on, and taking it from that point to closet drama when theater could not be produced out. So closet drama, that meaning literally produced in small spaces. I mean, I'm not going to go through my history knowledge of stuff, but I was very interested in it. But the theater company, it's not a theater company, but the theater department knows what they have. They need to always do. I'm not sure about all theaters and how they operate, but I mean, you need to be able to do the classics in it, plus things that are edgy, things that are, it just needs to be, you need to expose students to all aspects of theater. And so so that's a philosophy, and it may seem very simplistic about it, but it also takes into consideration what the actors can do. It doesn't mean that you choose things just because you want to choose things that will stretch them and give them that experience to expand, from beyond something, Harry gets the car on Friday night kind of place. And for now it happens not on college campuses, but in high schools. But I'm thinking about the people that I went to school with from Stillwater High School. Patty Graham, your sorority sister. She was a year behind me. She played Antigone. She was cast as Antigone, and so she did Antigone. Betty Taylor, I won't say it again, but another one of them. She was a Stillwater graduate, high school graduate. She was cast in I Remember Mama as the lead, all of these picking her lead roles. And I was cast as Juliet. Jim Turtelot, who is in my class, and a wonderful guy, extremely talented. He played Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet, which is a key role, a showcase role. Then he got to play a lead. He was Death Takes a Holiday, and it was directed by Miss Locke. I feel that she had a tremendous influence upon. I know that she had a tremendous influence upon play choices, and she was drawn to French work. One of the shows that I think I just discussed it earlier, The Mad Woman of Chaillot. It was by Jean Giraudoux, and I was a stage manager for it. I had a walk-on at the end. Didn't I talk about it earlier here? So she directed it. She chose that. And Ring Around the Moon was also a French work. It was based upon a French work by, and I'm going to use the pronunciation of Miss Locke's, Annawyn, instead of Ennui. It's interesting that that would be an issue, but she knew stuff, and she was experienced. Her stuff. Anyway, Neil Gaby, also, he was not from my hometown. He was from Brooklyn, New York, and this play, The Traitor, was a play that she selected, I know, for him, because He was an unusual actor, and a role doesn't come up. It's that type all the time. I hope I'm expressing the fact that she was sensitive in the way that she, and all, I think the whole staff had to have been always sensitive about what was available to them, but also I don't know that somebody else would have considered my friend Neil Gaby separately and apart from just, the other drama students. But he had proved himself. He came as a freshman, and he participated in everything that was done. He played roles, smaller roles, and then when we got to be seniors, he got to do this. And I think that was a wonderful thing for him. I was also in that show, and but it's just the sensitivity to that is applicable more is not something that I think that you necessarily see in the university level, because it's a high level of ability usually, that's there. It's matriculating, and not that Neil didn't have that. It's just that you wouldn't be necessarily thinking of searching for a role, for him. But I think that she did.
And she did more than direct.
She did more than direct. I was mentioning the speech department. There's Dr. Anderson was head of the English department, and then there was another teacher in the speech department. His name was Anderson too, and I was in one of the courses that I took from him was a course in discussion, and he in that class he picked 4 people out of the class, and he asked if we would be willing to go to a competition. Well, I grew up teething on competition. Not that I won, but I was familiar with the experience. And it was a discussion competition, and it was going to be at Kansas University. So there were 4 of us who went. We traveled. I was married at the time when we did it. No, I wasn't. I wasn't married. But anyway, it was an overnight thing, and we competed, and we won, which was a surprise to me. I couldn't believe that we won, but it was a fun experience, and so that was something that I related to, and it was through a speech teacher that that I had that opportunity available to me, and the idea that anybody's thinking about what's going on in the theater department from a student is just, it's not happening unless they are so advanced in their thinking and so wise that you're not sitting around pondering, the philosophy of the theater department, although that probably is an issue that many people did. I shouldn't classify it that way, saying that it didn't happen. Probably very astute, and I mean that sincerely, students maybe would research that to find out exactly, what they felt was the philosophy of the theater department before they committed to it. Mm-hmm. And of course, all departments want to recruit talented, wonderful people, just like the athletic department does. I mean, you are a life, a young. This sounds corny, but a young student brings that newness, to the experience, and so you bring something as a student to it, and to the bargain, and then the teachers have to, it's lovely when and I think that you have to always be reminded, you have to just always remind yourself that you are the adult in the room as a teacher always. Sometimes you lose sight of that, I think. but I just, because I have my own infirmities in it, I don't want to generalize about anybody else. Although I don't want to do that. And so I don't want to step on anybody who was more advanced than I, who would be thinking about what is Oklahoma State's theater philosophy. I realize it very definitely there is one, and they're definitely thinking about the student and what can we do, what's available here to stretch these people or give them an opportunity, that they would not have otherwise. I attended some classes at University of Tulsa, and I was in an acting class, an advanced acting class. And one of the students, as our final exam, we had to plan a performance. And this one young man, I'll never forget it. He worked so hard on this thing. He rigged up a technical thing that was capable, sounded, like somebody it'd say off Broadway, could come up with. But at a certain point, something dropped from the ceiling, and actually fireworks went off or something like that, and the band burst into singing, playing probably something, and it was connected with what it was that he was doing. So it was all part of his production. And he was told that he did not have any talent, that that he needed to realize that. And I was stunned by that. And that would have never happened, at Oklahoma State, at least in my experience, it wouldn't have. I'm sure plenty of people were, caught up by their bootstraps, and somebody would say, in fact, I was too. When I was mentioning Mad Woman of Chaillot, I was a stage manager, and at the end of one of I think it was a performance, it could have been a rehearsal, but I wanted to always get out of I was in costume because I had a bit part at the end. And so I always went quickly and got back into my stage manager working stuff, jeans, that kind of thing. And it turns out that I had been, I won't go into the details, but I was being yelled for, just yelled and yelled. And it wasn't Miss Locke, she was the director, she wasn't doing it. And I'll just stop it there, but I was upbraided strongly for not being there like that when it was over. And it was because I was trying to get back into my, and there was no explaining it to this person. It was just, and he was in a position to, take out after me. And once again, Miss Locke, do not pay any attention. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtains. And he was, I still feel he was wrong to do that, but nevertheless, I'm just saying, well, that we got, called and people were, talked to, but not as something as insensitive as you have no talent and you have no business in theater. I mean, it's just heartbreaking to think about it now. I'm going to turn and see what I've got over here. I think that I may have done all this. Yes. I did mention that, the opening of the, do you have any?
You're doing fine. Just keep rolling.
Just keep rolling. I think that I do not know all the people from the theater department who have gone on to, fame and fortune and strength in whatever aspect of theater they've chosen to follow. I don't know them all. I happen to know, about Jay Daniels he was, as I mentioned before, his wife was the one that did the sculpture of Miss Locke that's in the lobby. But he was a very talented young man on the stage. And so he was a very fine actor, but he also was, he was producing. And I only know about him because he was relatively close to the time that I graduated myself. So I was coming back, I've come back to Stillwater all my life. Who is it, the writer? You wrote, you can't go home again, but I can. I know what that means, you can't go home, but I can come back to Stillwater now that my son and daughter-in-law are here. I have a home. I call it Spa Shamas because I'm treated so well there and nicely, and I love their house. It's just a beautiful house. But from the OSU, they have to have, the department has to have, and I have not researched it to report it, but they have to have people, like my friend Patty Graham, who was in my class, she became a television producer, a producer. She was not an associate or assistant producer. She produced the Dinah Shore. She was, you remember, she's one that is one of your, what is your sorority? I forget.
Yeah, right.
Anyway,
did they teach you that during pledgeship, or
she would?
That would be Pi Beta Phi.
Okay.
Pi Beta Phi.
Thank you. I'm old and I just can't keep it straight. She produced the Dinah Shore show. She produced a Flip Wilson show. It's amazing to me, to think of her doing that. Not that she didn't have the capacity to. She was a very intelligent young lady, woman, and she was, I think, she won. There was some kind of a thing. It wasn't a Rhodes Scholar. Maybe it was a Rhodes Scholar because she participated in that. But I also mentioned, I think I mentioned Betty Taylor. Betty Taylor was a year ahead of me from Stillwater, but when she came to college, the first show that was being produced here, but she was here a year, so I'm talking about what the staff and the knowledge of who they have, and it grew year by year by year. I mean, by term, the 4 years of it, because I know that the theater department has to have a much larger enrollment than it did when I was here. And there are 2 scholarships in the theater department that I know that I've had something to, well, my family has had something to do with. So the professional theater aspects, television, whatever springs off from that, I know that there are those OSU students who have gone into it and are doing well. And you probably know them, some of them more. I mean, I don't, in your capacity, as an historian. But then the area, the community theater aspect, that's where I come from. But my work has been not always in community theater. As an actress, I was in a professional company in Toledo, Ohio, and have been hired as an actress rather than I don't want to say rather than any employment that I've had, which has been as a professional actress or director. Mm-hmm. And I've always felt very secure, and I know this is repetitious, very secure in my background, my Oklahoma A&M / Oklahoma OSU background. I've always been proud, even though when I say, that I'm from Oklahoma and that I was, I mentioned the school even, and people want to think that I'm, from Oklahoma University. I'm very quick, and I'm not ugly about it. Too ugly. I'm very proud that I've been, from Oklahoma. That this university, it's my university, and I love it. And I've loved it since I moved here in the 4th grade, because it just was my place. I think probably that I was very lucky as a kid, because I lived, as I said, I live right next door to, what is it again? You're sorting. I lived right next door to where they're building a new house. I actually lived right next door to that location when I was in the 4th grade.
On Cleveland Street.
On Cleveland Street. And so I felt at home on the university campus. I never felt like I'm a big shot here or anything like that. But as a child, I had a familiarity with it, so I was not afraid of it. It wasn't it was an availability. It was an extension of my life experience from an early point, and it still is, because here I am with you now, and I'm doing this, and this is part of the, history. I mean, connected. It's amazing to me to see this cycle, how it goes in the different ways that you're touched by it, and I think that what you're doing is wonderful. Because I think it's important, and I am honored to be foisted off on you. I am. I did mention that with the awards, that Miss Locke was awarded, and that her native heritage, she was proud of it, and she deserved, that kind of recognition. And I'm getting ready, I think, to sign off. Unless you have some other.
Well, before you do, can you tell us a little bit more about one of your neighbors? You had mentioned in the last conversation, Edmund Lowe. Was one of your neighbors?
Well, he was not a neighbor, but he was a friend. He was a friend of my parents, and when we first moved here, my neighbor, I want to mention, he's one that I mentioned earlier to you, that my neighbor was, that I want you to read about him. But Edmund Lowe, he was a friend of Mother's, and Mamie. That Mrs. Lowe's name was Mamie, and she was a good friend of Mother's. And I've tried to think back on that and figure out where is it that these paths cross, because my parents, they came here. They both attended East Central in Ada, and whether it was there that they met, the people that they knew when we moved here, or whether it was because they did graduate work at OU. And so, that's Oklahoma University.
Or it could be church, I guess. Maybe they crossed at church. I don't know. I don't know. Well, anyway, he was head of the library when we moved here. Well, the library was just barely new. Really new when you came to the university, when you started college. It opened in 1953.
Okay.
So they were naming it about that time, I
Uh-huh.
guess, too.
Well, I don't know how long he had been here before that, but the thing about it was that I didn't know that they were friends of my parents, and they actually had two boys. I don't know whether I mentioned three children: Frances, their daughter, who was the oldest child, and then Mark and Donald. And Mark and Donald were both in my class, although Mark was not. I was older than he. Donald and I were actually, the same age in the class, but Mark was there with it in the same class. That the parents somehow it worked out that way, but they were very friendly. I mean, they were gracious. And my mother, my dad wasn't part of this visit, but we went over to their house, and it was not, I think maybe I did try to identify location. I bet you money the house is still there, because it was a nice house. It wasn't, a grand, thing. At one point, the Duck Street from 6th north for maybe 2 blocks could have been called Mansion Row, because there were they still are there, but I think they're divided up and stuff. But it was, but they were intact, very nice houses, beautiful homes. And their home wasn't one of those. It was not far from the Stillwater library over, on 6th Street, or not where the Lowe's lived. We actually walked from their house. Frances, I had her take me over. She was a high school student, I think, at the time. And she's the one that took me in to the library. I think I described it, but it was an eye-opening experience for me. I had no idea. I don't know what was going on in my educational experience, that I had never seen a library like that before. And Frances is the one that took me over, and then Mother remained and kept talking. But she talked frequently about Mamie, and as I said, they were good friends. And of course, Edmund Lowe, he was lovely too. I mean, but I'm only in the 4th grade, and so it's to assess them is. But the thing that I've thought about it, because to think that you have that named after you, that structure it is, as you were telling, came on campus in 1953. It's to this day, it's an impressive. Mm-hmm. It hasn't. I'm sure that there are ways. It's just like this. I was talking with Annette about it. This establishment, it moved, from where it moved over on 6th Street. But that building is such an impressive building. I mean, it is, it's the Carnegie. It's the big version of the Carnegie, and we've got a lot of those in Denver, because I see them. There's one in my hometown there. This is my hometown, but the hometown of Littleton at the end of Main Street is another Carnegie Library, and as I say, they're clearly identifiable. But to have your name put on a structure like that and it be recognized is a tremendous tribute. And so I've had to, think about that, because he was just a friend of my parents, and they were, hello there, yes, happy, my dad, I think it had to have been at the University of Oklahoma, where they were in graduate school together, that they met. And it's interesting to me that my parents, and they were in a group of educators that were outstanding. I mean, that's who their friends were. And so it was to be able to go into that house and in that family and have them be so welcoming. It was that summer. I mean, we may have been in the Cleveland house by the time that I met them, but I remember walking over with her, and I was a little, I was only in the 4th grade, and I was a little shy, about it because she was a big high school person, but they had to have been probably all 3 of the children highly, I mean, rankable. They're probably they were probably members, all 3 of them, of Mensa. Now, Donald, who is my age, I don't know, but I know Mark. I've been very curious. I know Donald is no longer living. I don't know about Frances.
She's not either.
But a library, as you know, I mean, all I'm doing is, with my commanding grasp of the obvious, is too wonderful a place you just can't even, it's hard to even describe it. There is a play, I don't want to get off track. Remember where we are here, because getting ready to, close it off a little bit. I mean, a lot. I think that I've said about all, but the structure says what it is. When it's a building like the building over on 6th Street, Stillwater, it says it. I am grand. I hold books here. And that structure over there that has Edmund Lowe's name on it, it's this way. And it almost goes up as big as it is wide, but not quite. And it says the same thing. Here I am. This is education right here. I am education. And for him, I mean, he had to have been, I don't know how many years he was here before 1953. He could have joined right after, his graduate work. He could have been brought to the campus. And that building, I suspect that people still feel attached to it. With its longevity, I would think people even feel more close to it, more drawn to it. To have it's an outstanding thing to have, a building like that named after you.
I think people have said it's the front porch of campus. The front porch of campus.
And that's an interesting thing to say about it, because it is. It's sitting there with, all the land in front, and it's so wonderful. It's been preserved that way. With the student union on the east side, and the Theta on the other. It's the OSU campus was voted by the Southern Living magazine as one of the most beautiful campuses in the country. And I think it must be, although I can't say that because I've visited them, but I can't imagine any one more beautiful. One of the things about Mark, the son of Edmund Lowe, this doesn't have much to do with anything but just a human interest story. He was a very fine bridge player, to the point of he couldn't suffer any nonsense. He would and I have a friend who is who my daughter-in-law knows, Sue Shedler, and
Also
And one time I got a call from Mark. This is Edmund Lowe's son. And he said, "Are you available to play bridge?" He said, "If you are, could you play? And do you have?" And he said, "Well, do you have anybody?" I said, "I don't know." Do you have anybody you could get, to play with you? Well, I guess I could ask Sue. And so I did. And and she was available. So we played bridge with Mark and his partner. I have no, but it was hysterical because I'm only saying this fondly about him because I remember it fondly, but you're supposed to put your card down like this. It was really interesting, but he was that kind of intelligence. And I have a relative, she's no longer living, she was a cousin. She was a math person, and many of the really terrific bridge players are math, oriented. And Mark may have been a math major. I ought to I wonder where he is now. No. But if you were a child, or you had a grandfather named Edmund Lowe, I think you'd have a lot to be proud of. So did I?
No, you're fine. How good were you at bridge?
Well,
I don't even know how to play. So
well, I loved bridge. I loved it, but I don't play enough to be good. But I do. I would like to play more regularly. I just enjoy it.
It was popular in the.
It was, in fact,
And did you play at the student union that time?
Did I do?
Where did you play that time when you played with Mark and Sue?
Well, I didn't play at the student union. I played, the first time I played was at the sorority house, and they came in and said, "Is anybody in here? We need a fourth. Can any?" I jumped up and ran in. And of course, they were appalled to find out I hadn't the foggiest idea, what to do. But I didn't care because I was interested in it. So I started playing then. I haven't advanced much from that time, but I love it still. And I'm thinking about Mark Lowe now. I just think I bet he's still around, and I bet you he's one of those, they call them, master points. How many master points do you have? Well, how many I have. Zero. And I don't play enough. But I wanted to make sure that I said this thing about Gary Busey, but I don't want to repeat it. I may have started out talking about him and talking about his. Did I mention at the beginning that one of the things that he regretted when he was nominated for his Academy Award? I didn't mention this at the beginning.
No, before we hit go, you did.
Okay, so it was not okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say that about him that I haven't seen him as a friend in years. So, but I did see. I looked at it on my phone because I saw it on my computer because it pops up on OSU goings on and stuff that these people over here set up for me to contact, because I want to keep in touch with what's happening on the campus, and I'm pretty well attuned to what's happening. So I got to see quite a bit of it. It just happened that I did find it of Gary when he came back and spoke here on the campus. And so I did see that, and then they have a brief thing that's, I guess I didn't see it from the beginning, and maybe this happened at the very beginning of his talk. or to a class, and maybe it was not even in a classroom, because it didn't look to me like it was the same classroom situation that I had seen on my computer. And what he said was, he said that Miss Locke videoed everything to her, he said. And he said, she taught me how to smile. I don't think I said these things earlier. And he said, and she taught me how to sit. And then he demonstrated it. And then he said something else that she said. And then he said that he wished that the one thing that he wished that when he was nominated for an Academy Award, that he had just come back to this campus and walked into her classroom and just thanked her for preparing him for his career. And that was, I thought, a really wonderful statement that he made, because sometimes his PR persona now is not full representative of what he is capable of expressing and things that he feels strongly. He was a friend of mine, and as I said, I haven't seen him in a very long time. When I was living in California before the Buddy Holly, he had made the Buddy Holly story, and he came to visit me in my apartment, because he came in Tulsa. He was in my house when he was back in Tulsa as a visitor, but he came to visit me in this apartment, and he had a lot of shots of himself in the movie that he showed to me, and he had a premonition then that was going to be a truly breakthrough thing for him, and it was. And to have been, and at that time they nominate more than 5 films now for Best Picture, or for Best Picture. That's changed. They nominate more now, but anyway, for his show to be thought of that way, and for him to be nominated for an Academy Award for it, was an amazing thing. And I felt, and I haven't seen him since that time in person or talked to him since, and that was a long time ago, because I did not want to be someone that would be, trying to hang on to a friendship that might not be the same, and I didn't want him to put him in an awkward position. But he was a good friend, and so I just thought that for him to express those things toward Miss Locke, that would have pleased her very much. But in saying that about his doing that, that's what many students felt about her. And no matter what area if you didn't even do anything with theater, people who knew her felt that way. She was open to, she had a house that was over here on 4th Street, and I'd like for us to go over there and to go by, see if the apartment is still there. And she then moved from that to the house that she lived in on 9th Street when she died. But you didn't even have to say, could I come by to her house? She probably wished that people had, because I know I do. I have to put the pairs of shoes that I've just taken off, get them under the chair. But if somebody, a student mainly, would come by, she was there. She was as warm as she is always. It never changed. She was always that way. She was just as I've said before, she is the most charismatic woman I've ever met. And the statue of her in the lobby over there is accurate, because that's the way she I think her hand is like this. You had me pose there by her like that, but she also, it's her gestures were, it wasn't this, it was open, and and that says it all about her, because she was very always approachable. And people's lives change and stuff, and anybody could go by, and I did, with things about, this is happening and I'm not happy, or blah, blah, and she would just, she really, she was listening, and she was sympathetic, but she said, listen, this is life you're living. This is life. And so her influence extends, and how what a lovely thing that I'm not saying I'm saying something lovely, but what a nice thing to have said about you, to know that the influence of your life goes far, and the influence of her life will never stop. It will always go on. And that, so to be able to, and I also, appreciated Mrs. Hillis, very much, but she was not that, the approachability was not available quite like that. And then Miss Locke's house was unique, and as you can imagine, somebody who's an interesting person and what they would have around them. So I am very grateful that I was able to have her in my life, and I think that I am very lucky to have grown up in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and to have access to this university, and to the friendships that I've made here, and my attachments with my family. And I just consider it to be a wonderful thing to meet you and have you here with me and leading me down memory lane. It's been a nice experience, and I thank you so much for it.
You're welcome. Before we end, though, do you have a favorite line?
From
From anything. I would imagine you could just pull one right out of your hat.
Well, I don't have a favorite line.
Okay.
But I have one that I guess I'd have. I think I can't say it in it, but I think that the lines that Juliet says about her, she's talking about Romeo and how, what he means to her. And so I think that those lines are the most beautiful ones that I got to speak. There's also the from the Glass Menagerie, when Amanda gets on the telephone, is she's trying to make a living for 2 children, and so she's selling subscriptions. And then part of it, of course, is the schmoozing, the saleswoman thing. So she's on the phone, and she's talking to somebody that she's trying to make a sale with. And she said, "You're just a Christian martyr. That's what you are, just a Christian martyr." And I get a kick out of that line. There was one line that's not my favorite line, but one that was said about me in the play, which I get a kick out of thinking about it now. I think I maybe talked about it a little bit. It was in a play that was being supervised through a class, and Miss Locke was the teacher, and I was supposed to play a jaded, young woman, and a woman who'd been through it. And so one of the lines that was said about me was, "Shut up." "Shut up. My God, you're getting common." And so I think about that line. I just get a kick out of it. Does that not sound, well, the thing about it was that I feel like I did do it. I guess maybe I've talked about it so much. But she pulled me aside and she said, "Annawyn, this one woman's a tough cookie." And of course he's saying this, "You're getting common," and she's telling me and said, "You're playing this like Pollyanna, you know." And so she toughened me up. And so then the next time I did it, I was tougher. You've asked me if I have a favorite line. I do like, and I'm trying to think, who says it, but it's describing Romeo, and I think, and about Romeo is, or the character is so wonderful, and that was used by, trying to think what was his name, the Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, who spoke, and I think it was Ted, or it could have been Robert Kennedy, who was speaking at John F. Kennedy's funeral. Take and cut him up in little stars, and he will make the heavens so bright. And it's just a wonderful statement about a personality, and the beauty of a personality. And I think that you could just pick a play of Shakespeare's and just put your hand in and pull it out and say, "This is my favorite line." Because nobody.
That'll give you something to think about on the plane ride home.
Yes. And but I won't be calling you again or texting you and saying,
okay.
"I forgot this."
That's okay too. I was going to say, someone once said, "Stories, memories, and reflections center us in history." So thank you for sharing your memories with us today.
Well, I turn it back to you. And thank you for this opportunity.
Okay.
And go Cowboys.
Go Cowboys.